Welcome to the Real Texas Radio Podcast with your host, Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again, or if you are joining the show for the first time, 1,000 welcomes. Big show today. It is officially early voting if you are a Dallas resident. Dallas ISD bond is on the ballot, and I'm going to tell you what you should do and why, in one man's opinion. I'm also going to be talking about an interesting development in the Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf murder trial in Collin County. The judge in the case made a very controversial decision earlier this week. We're going to be talking about shenanigans in Austin, shenanigans, of course, in Dallas. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast. You can also follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin. If you're in one of those big streaming apps, please give the show a like, 5 stars, drop a comment if you have time. It just takes a minute, and it makes a really big difference for an independent, totally free local podcast. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. Okay, first I want to talk about the DISD bond, the Dallas ISD bond. It's actually the early voting period now. I am going to vote today. I actually forgot about it. Time just crept up on me. The actual election day, it's a Saturday election because, if we have elections on Saturday, that drives voter participation and turnout because of all of the working people. They can vote on Saturday because apparently they weren't able to vote on any of the early voting days. That's why the turnout for these local elections, particularly May local elections, is abysmal. But that's a strategy. That's why Dallas ISD schedules bonds for May, because they don't want high voter turnout. They want low, reliable yes votes to turn out. And just to recap, if you're not aware, Dallas ISD, they are trying to get over the line a $6.2 billion bond, the majority of which will go to fund brand new school buildings and rehabbing schools, but largely building brand new schools for a student population which has been declining for over a decade. So we need a bunch of brand new schools, according to Dallas ISD. And, one of the big reasons that the far left is promoting why you should vote for this bond, which is just a synonym for debt, which is just a synonym for opening up a brand new high-interest credit card, which is going to result in a property tax hike, which you're supposed to be excited about that because the property tax hike is only a 1 penny, I believe, increase per $100 valuation. You're supposed to be excited about that because it could have been a lot higher. It could have been a much more costly tax hike. So you're supposed to be excited about that, right?
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Yeah, it's all for the children. And the children and the teachers, they've been working so hard. They have all of these, all of the schools that were subpar performers. They have gotten the school ratings up to C's, B's, and A's. And so therefore, the district deserves a $6.2 billion brand new credit card to spend on brand new schools. Now, I'm originally from Boston. That's a frame of reference for me. I attended schools that were located in very old buildings, as did my brothers. I had a couple of brothers, they went to Boston Latin. Have you ever heard of that, Boston Latin? It's where a number of the founding fathers attended high school. And it's a very famous school. It's a very prestigious school. I don't know if you have to take a test to get into it anymore. The Democrats, they hate making a child take a test that proves that he can read and do a little bit of math in order to go to school, because they like to get all of the dopes and the illegal aliens and the bleep bums. They like to get them into every campus possible and make life hard for everybody, teachers, the other students, the parents, so on and so forth. In any case, Boston Latin, the school building, it's very old, but it's very popular still. It's very popular. In fact, it's so popular, this ancient, by U.S. standards, school building, that there are many parents who commit fraud in terms of their residency. They lie to get their kid to be able to get into this prestigious school that sends, I believe, at least a couple dozen students to Harvard each year. So I didn't go to Boston Latin. I didn't get into Boston Latin. I got into the third tier of the exam schools, formerly the exam schools in Boston. Also in a very old building. I think it used to be a factory. Oh boy. It's a wonder and a marvel I'm still walking around and breathing. In fact, that I attended high school in this old building on Malcolm X Boulevard in Roxbury, situated in between two police stations and a rather notorious bus station. And they got rid of that too, or they changed the test, the Democrats in Boston, because that was racist. It was a majority black and Hispanic school, and that test was racist though. Boston is another city, of course, with a student population that is in free fall.
Always said the same thing. Our children, our children, our children.
So I'm voting 100% no. I'm voting no all the way down the DISD bond. And you know what $6.2 billion represents? That is larger than the annual budget of the entire city of Dallas, which is the 9th largest city in the United States. That's what $6.2 billion represents. $6.2 billion represents about double the asking price of the previous bond that Dallas asked voters for, I think just about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, which at the time was the largest bond ask in Texas history. We have a bit of a bond addiction here in the state of Texas. And I think, I don't know if it was maybe it was the last May election. Don't quote me on the date. Within the last couple of years, I remember reading, and I think I even talked about it on the show, there were 80 bond proposals set before voters around the state of Texas. Many of them schools, many of them football stadiums, brand new football stadiums for the high school. You know what? In New Hampshire, my parents lived there in rural New Hampshire. There was just a bond election. I actually don't know the outcome of the bond election, but on the ballot was printed the reading and the math scores. Now, this is rural New Hampshire, not a whole lot of illegal aliens, okay, a very white population. And the reading and the math scores demonstrated that only about 1 in 3 kids could read and do math. 1 in 3 was at grade level, right? How common is that story in the United States, in Dallas, in everywhere else? And they wanted a bond, I don't know, new building, right? Because if the kids were just in a new building, they would feel better about themselves, and then they would be able to read by osmosis. Isn't that how that works? Oh, no. So I don't know how the bond election went in New Hampshire. My father voted no. He voted hell no on the bond election, just like I'm going to be voting hell no. And you know what? There's all these excuses about why kids can't read and, blame the teachers. The teachers might be partially to blame because they're not doing any reading, not any real reading in school. They do a lot of reading theater. They do a lot of fake reading. They do a lot of circus reading, Cirque du Soleil kind of reading. But in terms of actually, if you want to read, you have to open up a book preferably a book that's on paper, a print book, and then you have to sit silently and you have to read it. That's what reading is. And if you have a parent, your parent hopefully has launched your reading career. But we make all the excuses. The professional excuse makers, who specifically for Democrats, make up all the excuses in the world why parents can't participate in their child's literacy or math or anything at all. They're so busy and they're so poor and they work so many jobs, right? Because life is much harder today than it was in the 19th century, when many students, they went to school for probably like 20% of the time that a kid is in school today. They went to one-room schoolhouses, and they had better penmanship, and they knew how to write a letter and read a letter, and they knew what syntax was, and the quality of what they were able to write. When we look at the letters, even though they didn't go to college, they had a few years of education in a rural school. Do you think that anybody today, do you think anybody alive today has a harder life than just about 99.9% of anybody who was alive in the 19th century? Do you think that anybody could come up with an excuse today that their life is harder in the age of smartphones and Netflix and DoorDash and Snap and Medicare and Medicaid and free public school for illegal aliens and free vaccines and free healthcare and a free public school bus and free school lunch and free school breakfast and free dinner and free everything? And they will still come up with the excuses today, the professional excuse makers, of why a child today, in the age of, remember a computer in every classroom? That was the mantra 30 plus years ago. Now it's a computer in every hand, a computer for each hand. We have so many computers now that there are some schools that are revising the policy to limit the computer time. I thought computers were going to make everybody literate to the max. But no, they can't read. If you put a newspaper article in front of a child, and I'm obviously an online article because, some of them wouldn't recognize a newspaper. But, I used to always hear a newspaper article was written for a 5th grade level. You know what? Go into a high school and pass out a newspaper article and ask a few who, what, when, where, why questions after giving the kids 10 minutes to read the article. And you're going to see a lot of blank stares. I'm going to get off of the subject in a minute. I know it's easy to crap all over schools and teachers. As somebody who was a teacher for 7 years,
It's always for me about the children.
Thank you, Nancy. We know. But reading, it's free, and nobody likes a free solution, unfortunately. The same thing with health. The solution to health is you take care of yourself. You go for a walk. You don't have to wear $400 worth of exercise clothing and shoes to go for a walk or go for a jog or throw a frisbee around or do some push-ups. Taking care of yourself is free. Teaching your child to read is free. The library, free, right? So that's a bad thing for the professional excuse makers when the solution and the answer is, it's so obvious and free that they hate it. So by their own admission, Dallas, which has all of these wins and successes, and I'm not going to dispute that. I'm not even going to get into that. But they claim that all of these campuses that were underperforming, that they've gotten pretty much all of them up to an adequate or better level. And apparently they were able to do that without all of these brand new school buildings. Apparently. So they proved it. So why then do they need these new buildings? What else are you going to do other than just have a new shiny thing? They've got a school building right in my neighborhood, several blocks away. And I'm sure it's a fairly valuable piece of real estate there is a park embedded in the land that, well, now I guess it's open to the public because there's no kids going to the school anymore. But the district is just hanging on to this piece of real estate. They're conducting, I believe, some kind of professional development there for adults. I only see adults going into this building sometimes. It's excess real estate for Dallas ISD. And guess what? That's not the only piece of excess real estate. Dallas ISD owns a lot of excess real estate. How much excess real estate do you have, you poor schmuck who's thinking about going and voting to give these people another $6.2 billion? Do you have any excess real estate in your portfolio? Why don't they leverage that real estate first? Why don't they sell off some of the real estate and use those proceeds for anything shiny and new before they try to hit me up, the taxpayer, for more money? All right, moving right along, up in Collin County. Well, another school-related story. You remember last year, has it been over a year already, that Austin Metcalf, the high school student who was a twin, I think he was 17, he was stabbed and ultimately died, stabbed to death by Carmelo Anthony, another student up in the bleachers at a track meet at a Frisco high school. And the judge has decided that this highly anticipated trial, which is, I believe, scheduled to begin June 1st, the judge, John Roach of the 296th District Court in Collin County, just north of Dallas, has decided the case will not be televised. He's not going to televise the case. And I didn't even read his rationale. I believe something to do with security, allegedly. The O.J. Simpson trial, notoriously televised. The Karen Reed trial, which I would it be a fair statement to say one of the biggest trials since the O.J. Simpson trial, plus the retrial in probably the tiniest courtroom in the United States, was televised twice. And do you know what? Trials, some people enjoy watching trials, I do, but for people who they don't pay attention a lot to their government, a trial can sometimes be one of the few reasons why citizens engage and learn about their government through the trial court system. You learn a lot watching a trial, especially if you don't watch trials often, and you get to see the mentality and the politics of your district attorney, or if you've got an elected judge, you get to see their politics. It's civic education. It's free civic education that actually draws an interest. And this judge, he's going to deny millions of Texans and millions of American citizens from being able to watch that trial and learn about their government and learn about the trial and process in the court system, which I think is a shame, but it's up to him, apparently. Okay, before I get into Dallas news, in Austin, just like in, I think, most of the major cities in Texas, including Dallas, including Houston, I think Fort Worth as well, San Antonio as well, they're all in various stages of either completely demolishing and building brand new convention centers, or refurbishing to the tune of anywhere from hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars, as is the case here in Dallas. And the rationale, of course, is, we need the new convention center because we need to keep attracting conventions to our city, because that the conventions drive the hotel tax, which is critical revenue for many cities. And so here is Austin at their, this is the Arts Commission, and they're all meeting. Most of them are on Zoom. A couple of them are in person. But one of the members of the committee, who I'm just guessing, but I'm judging her based on her appearance, a young white woman. I'm guessing that she's not a radical far right conservative. That's not the vibe she's giving me. If she's on the Arts Commission. Well, now that the convention center in Austin is closed for these renovations, I don't know how long it's going to be closed. Well, very, very interesting phenomenon that has occurred. Here's the cut.
To the greater Austin community, many of whom believe that we need more investment in arts, culture, music, heritage, all the things that HOT currently supports with like a itty bitty teeny tiny fraction of the total. And when we're looking at this and saying, yo, convention center's closed and we're doing record numbers, it's probably not the conventions that are bringing in the HOT. So we have to be able to have that conversation. Like, I just can't, as a data person, researcher, like I just can't reiterate enough like how rare it is to have this experiment. Like we have a control, like a natural experiment happening right now that we didn't have to create in a lab, and we cannot.
Yeah, so this arts commissioner is just pointing out, she's looking at the data, and there's record or increased HOTS tax, hotel tax essentially, that's primarily paid by tourists, out-of-towners, out-of-staters. And the convention center is closed. But the logic for having the convention center, and especially the logic for building a brand new one and demolishing the existing convention center, is conventions drive the hotel tax. And right now, Austin is demonstrating that that isn't the case, apparently. And we're going to be getting the same jive, nonsense, foolishness, lies, tricks, and shows in Dallas every time they come back and they ask for more and more money and revising up the budget. We don't even have a total cost estimate on how much this brand new convention center is going to cost, but I mean, certainly north of $3 billion. It's already north of that. You could easily double that, probably, by the time they're done with it, maybe even more. All right, as I am recording, the Dallas City Council, they've been at it all day. They're in executive session, but they spent a lot of the day talking about this homelessness ordinance that would essentially have restricted street feeding downtown. And some of the council, they wanted to require anybody street feeding. So like church groups, they'll come down on a Saturday, for example. They go down near the homeless shelter, the bridge on the back side of Dallas City Hall, essentially the big dead zone. And it looks like the zombie apocalypse, I-30, the whole thing. And they will provide meals to the homeless. And I know their heart's in the right place. And they're well-intended, well-meaning, I know. And then the homeless, they throw all the trash all over the street because they don't give a bleep about anything, because the vast majority of them are mental patient drug addicts. And then the church groups, they go away. And then they come back next week. And so the city wants to put some steps in place, like making them register a couple of days in advance before they show up and conduct these street feedings, which just create blight and nuisance and problems. And, unfortunately, where I stand on the homeless, junkie bum, criminal vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist, reprobate issue. If I had the reins, they would all be deported to Crack Island. And all of the church groups that want to go street feeding, they'd all be directed there. Free ferries. All of the outreach would be happening on Crack Island. And you know what? All of the tax money that is currently wasted, that is just squandered with this group, would just be redirected to doing food drops and fresh water drops onto Crack Island, even though that's not what any of these homeless people want. They just want drugs. So the issue is, and the irony is, so many of us want Dallas and wherever, in whatever city you live, your government to get tough and crack down on this incorrigible, unproductive, uncooperative, antisocial group. And then the city, when they decide they're going to do something, it's actually in violation of the First Amendment. One of the tenets, obviously, of the First Amendment is religious freedom. And churches serving meals to the poor is clearly, it's part of religion. And this has already been litigated in multiple courts, in federal court. And there is enormous scrutiny on any rules that ban street feeding outright. And I didn't even see the outcome. I had other things on my plate, but I was glad there were two counselors who were speaking out, who were usually at each other's throats, and they both happened to be pointing out, and I agreed with their legal assessment, that this was just going to be inviting a lawsuit on the city. And I completely understand the neighbors who are frustrated. Some of them I know who live fairly close to the area. They're very fed up with the conduct. But this, unfortunately, is not the route to eliminating the problem. It's just going to be struck down in court. It's just going to cost the city legal fees. And, I thought it was pretty cut and dry. They actually talked about this a lot the previous week. And then here's Laurie Blair, counselor from District 8, who the word salad here that this is her asking about how she's trying to figure out how to vote on this issue of the ordinance.
Approve the what's on the floor that is read by Mr. Basadua, and I ask on the record that it goes that after this is whichever one is approved, that you continuously work in committee to refine, define, and to correct anything that is incorrect as to what we need to move forward to. Would that then give everybody what they want? It would move the need to move 17 into either whether with or without the definition into chapter 50, and then the direction giving to you.
I gotta just pause there. Did you what? Huh?
Because it comes in the morning.
Yeah, did that remind you of anybody? Talk about a word salad. Did she manage to insert a single piece of punctuation in that word salad? That was her second word salad. And I think Mayor Johnson, in a nice way, he actually kind of told her, like, can you just stop? Because nobody knows what the hell you're saying, including you. We don't think you know what the hell you're saying. And she is, nice lady. I've actually met her. I think she's a very nice lady, but she's just out of her league here on the council, clearly. And she should be writing down her questions, and she should really always be reading from notes. She's demonstrated that. But she's one of those, you get her on a roll, and she just doesn't stop. Thank God for that clock, though. All right, this is the last topic I'm going to get into for today, but housing, affordable housing, attainable housing. It always comes up, it seems, at Dallas City Council, and after the executive session, the council, they decided to vote to just require a simple majority to remove developer projects from the tax rolls, essentially for a lifetime tax abatement, just requiring a simple majority or 8 votes rather than a super majority of 10 votes. Even though, as all of these counselors, they point out, well, these always pass by supermajority. They always get at least 10 votes. So what's the problem? Well, very few of them mentioned, I don't know if it's because of the cognitive capacity is limited, or because it didn't benefit their argument, to mention that a council term is a maximum of 8 years now. So a council in 5 or 10 years may look very different. And having a supermajority to remove property from the tax rolls when these same people who vote for every single tax abatement without fail, every single developer with a suit and tie and an LLC who comes down the pike and tells them that $1,350 a month is affordable housing for an apartment in a dicey area, I'll put it to you that way, they vote for it. They go for that. And then in the same breath, they complain about libraries closing. They would love to talk about libraries closing. Oh, $2 million for the library. Meanwhile, they just exempted tens of millions of dollars over 60 years in property taxes, potentially, for one developer. And of course, they voted a simple majority. And it's just so infuriating. And you know what really drives me nuts? All of the projects that go up, all of the new development, it's all multifamily. And I live in multifamily. I live in a condo complex. I'm a gay guy. I'm not going to have children.
We've all been a little gay, man. That's not even that wild anymore.
But do you know what? Every single couple I know who, as soon as they start even thinking about a child factoring into the equation, they're getting a single family house. They're moving into a single family house. They're not moving into an apartment. They're not moving into a townhouse. It can be a 4,000 square foot townhouse with 5 bathrooms. They're not moving into it. Why? Because there's no yard. Why? Because they don't want to share walls. Every single family, every single straight couple with one kid, and unless there's a problem, unless they can't financially, they move to single family. So that's why they go to the burbs. But even though Dallas leadership, they keep talking about how much they care about families, and they just, the Democrat fake a broken record about how they care about working families, when really their core constituency is non-working, non-families, homeless and illegal aliens. They keep putting up apartments that families aren't interested in living in, and that there's only a certain kind of a person who's going to live in an apartment. We know if you make the apartments cheap enough, then it's going to be a bunch of criminals and all the criminals' families, and then all of the enemy families of the criminals who are also criminals, who are going to require police and EMTs and all kinds of code enforcement and other civil servants who are very expensive to keep on the tax rolls, needing to go to those apartments all the time. That's one group. Then I guess you got the Bronins. You got me, the gay guys. We'll live in a condo. We're not going to create that much trouble. Some of us will. I know some gay guys that they'll create some trouble in your apartment building. But stability is single family. It's just a fact. You want to go ahead and if I just made your mind explode and you think that's bigotry and racism, you know what? It doesn't matter if you're black. Doesn't matter if you're Hispanic. Doesn't matter if you're white. Doesn't matter if you're Asian. If you're a family, you want a house. Right across the street, directly across the street, right outside my front window, there used to be 2 single-family houses, and they were occupied by Latinos, families, straight people, working-class people. And one of them decided to sell, one of the families, and the only way to make the property work for the developer, through his perspective, he needed both single-family houses, abutting lots. And that family was tormented. I'm not even going to get into it. What I observed, homeless. I'm not even going to get into it. In any case, both families, I'm sure they were well compensated. I bet they more than doubled their money, maybe even tripled their money in the deal. So good for them. They moved. I'm sure they moved to single family, by the way. They didn't move to an apartment. They probably left Dallas, and they're probably in a single family home, maybe even outside of the county. In any case, 7 townhouses went up. 18 months ago, they were finished. Most of them are unoccupied. No family will ever live in them. No family will ever live in them. One of the developers is living in one of them. Most of them are vacant. They're doing Airbnb, short-term, mid-term. They can't get anybody to buy them. Nobody's interested. Certainly not families. 2 Hispanic families were just driven out of the neighborhood for a white developer to put up 7 units that no family would ever live in, no matter what. Things would have to so drastically change to put a family in there. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up on that note. I am Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Keep tuning in. Keep listening. Follow me on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin, and I will catch you on the next episode.